So first question I have for you. You had a velocity session titled, it's a long title, hopefully I won't screw it up. I made a map of the internet and what it can teach us about speeding up websites. Did I get that?
You got that right.
Okay, good. So can you share some of what you've learned from creating that map?
So actually one of the things I said in my session is it's not really a map. It's more of a diagram. A map sounds really grand. People get really excited. Oh, we've made a map.
Right.
So there's no crazy kind of spidering out of here's how everything plugs together. But I think for me, a lot of developers don't really understand all of the different pieces that make up the internet. It's a really complex thing. And the whole thing started because I was talking to Steve Souders, who's obviously the co-chair of Velocity, and I realized that he made this really significant contribution to the field because he didn't just look at the typical thing that people are looking at. He looked outside of his field of expertise. So he was this server engineer building server software, and he looked outside of that and said, well, what are these guys doing on the browser, and is that really appropriate? Is that fixing anything? And one of the things that I really wanted to do was kind of step outside of my expertise and try all of these different things that we plug together to create the internet and see how do they overlap? How do they plug together in order to create the full experience? And how does that impact what we do? So if I'm optimizing a particular piece, how is that impacted by the other pieces? And how does me having a better understanding of each of those pieces allow me to do a better job of optimizing the thing that I'm focusing on, the thing that's my expertise? So what I really hope that I gave the participants of the talk was a little taste of all of the different technologies that go together to form the internet, everything TCP, DNS, even things like hardware. Everybody has a home Wi-Fi, and one of the things that I find really striking is that we make assumptions about how fast people's internet is, and a lot of the speeds of people's internet is based on their Wi-Fi rather than the speed of their internet connection.
Right.
So if you have terrible home Wi-Fi, if you've ever been in an internet cafe and they have terrible Wi-Fi, that's how fast your internet is. It's not how fast the connection to the cafe is, it's how fast their Wi-Fi is. Right. So thinking about these kinds of issues and how does that affect what we think about in terms of optimization.
That's an interesting one, the Wi-Fi. That's a really good one.
Yeah. And we don't typically think about that because it's outside of the sphere of our control as developers. I can't go around and fix the world's Wi-Fi.
Sure.
But thinking about that means that I have the opportunity to try and optimize for people that have terrible Wi-Fi.
Sure.
And I can assume that as a constraint because I know that it exists.
So kind of along those lines, for the things that developers can control, what are the main areas that they should focus on for improvement?
So I think a conference like this is really interesting because people are really trying to push the boundaries of where performance are. But there was a really interesting paper. The guys from Zoomph released a paper at the conference, and they went and analyzed the top 1,000 Alexa sites. And what they found was that there's still a significant amount of these big companies that are thinking about performance that still don't do the very basic things. They found that there's an awful lot of opportunity for people just to do the basic performance guidelines that Yahoo published 3, 4, 5 years ago. You know, these different steps that they can really use to get significant improvements. So a really obvious example that we always talk about, and it's considered, it's the simplest thing that anybody can do, is if you turn on gzipping. So if you turn on compression so that when your server sends a message to the user's web browser, it's compressed instead of sending the whole information uncompressed over the internet, that has a significant advantage, but there's still an awful lot of people that don't do that, and that's a 5-minute change.
Why do you think they don't do it?
Because either they don't know or it's organizationally not important. And that's a really significant point, because until organizations decide that performance is important, you know, there won't be these shifts. It has to become one of the things that's really significant at Yahoo is that we've systematized performance into the dashboards that our executives use to assess the different groups' performance.
Okay. So
YSlow is our tool that helps us analyze performance, and different groups at Yahoo get assessed on how good their grade is. Is your grade good? That means that you guys are doing a good job at giving a fast, performant experience to our customers. And if you guys aren't hitting that level, we need to know why. What is the reason? And it's okay if is it a trade-off between features and performance, and that's okay. We can make a choice. We can make a business decision. But we've recognized the value of performance within our organization, and we've taken steps to make sure that this is something that we care about, and we need to deal with it.
So what are the main areas where you would recommend a company put its resources behind? Is it education, getting awareness out there, or are there other aspects?
I think education's a big part of it, but I think that the developers are very good at self-educating. If you tell a developer, I have this problem that I want you to solve, the information's out there. There's great material coming out of conferences like this. And I think the developers are very good at self-educating what we really need. And I think the focus of last year's Velocity was great, of here are all these case studies that show that performance is really important. And what I'd really like to see is some of the dashboard products that people are demonstrating downstairs, making it into the executive view frame where we can say, look, we expect you to hit these targets, and we want you to go and enable yourselves with the tools to hit these targets. So again, at Yahoo, we have our WISO tool, which is a free tool, and we've built dashboards that take the results of that assessment and make it a metric where we want people to hit a certain grade. We want you to be at least this fast on your site, and we're going to use this tool to assess whether you've hit that. And then that's an easy thing that an executive can look at and say, you guys aren't hitting this benchmark that we want you to hit. We need you to improve that. We need to focus resource on going through these 14 rules and making sure you hit these 14 rules so that your grade meets this minimum expectation that we have.
Now, what are some of the sites, the tools and the technologies that sites can use to quickly make changes? I'm not thinking about longer term stuff, but the low-hanging fruit.
The low-hanging fruit. So WISO definitely. So WISO will help you assess that, and then we have these 14 rules. Google have page speed. Same thing. A lot of these things are really simple. So the gzipping is great because it's a simple server configuration. Some of the changes, a lot of them tend to be developmental changes, but that's actually kind of nice in a way because you can treat it as a development project. You can say, we're going to create a specific improvement by looking at the things like not putting our scripts at the bottom of our page, these really basic things, and we can take those as a discrete project and change our build process. So that would be, for me, that's continuous integration is a sign of a mature, development cycle, and something like that, where instead of people just creating stuff, create a process or a script that builds your files together so that you don't have to worry about all this performance stuff. And that's a really easy discrete project where you can say we're going to take a week out and we're going to build some scripts which build our website and create all of the minified CSS, all of the minified JavaScript, move all of that stuff to the bottom of the page, and just create it so that when we do stuff in the future, we continue to do it in the right way and take the pain out. Because if you look at performance techniques, it's an ongoing thing. You can't do it once and then forget about it. You have to maintain that. So the best project that you as a company can do to improve that is to build a tool that does it for you, that automates it, so that the developers don't have to put in additional effort and additional time in order to keep maintaining these simple best practices that they should already be adhering to.
Interesting. Now, you sort of answered this, but I want to just sort of zero in on the point. If I'm understanding correctly, then an optimization project is not a project that ever ends, right?
No.
I mean, it's just an ongoing effort, and that's how companies should be looking at it.
Well, I think that's somewhat true and somewhat not true. So it's definitely true that it never ends. It's a best practice. Best practices never end because you want somebody to continue to use the best practice. You don't want them to suddenly dive off and do some other random thing that they feel like. So you want them to maintain that standard of best practice. But at some point, I think you can hit a point where you can start to say, we've optimized our site, and now we can compare further optimizations of speed versus other features that we want to implement. If we do this speed optimization, it will mean that we're not doing this feature. And I think that's an okay trade-off. Performance is a feature like other things, but I think for a lot of people right now, because they haven't optimized at all, it's actually the most essential feature that they can do. So the incremental benefit of doing their performance optimization will have a much bigger impact on their bottom line, on their conversions, than adding some new feature X, Y, Z, that adds a new preference or whatever. Okay. And I think that for me is kind of, when you start to see performance as a business case and say, look, there's a real reason why we want to do this, then you can start to make good business decisions and say, how do we empower our developers to do this? And let's give them the space and the motivation to go out and find the tools that will help them do the right thing for our specific project.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Mate, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.